Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We have a lot to do. So good morning, everyone, and welcome, and thank you very much for coming to this special meeting. And you'll be helping make some decisions today. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Let me do roll call, and as I promised, if people are not here today, this is a special meeting. I know they had other commitments, and I am not going to hold this absence against them. However, we are going to look at a couple of our members because I know one in particular has not done anything, and it's time to replace because we have people that are very willing to come on board and help out. So roll call. Rebecca? Here. Fran? Here. Marie? Here. Tony, I know, had another commitment, yes. Correct? Dion?
Yeah.
Lorena? Okay. Matt?
Here.
Dave? Will? I'm here. Emily? Here. Jeff?
Here.
Jeannie's on a business trip. Fred is flying home today. And Victoria is at a conference, I believe. Or I thought she was.
Is she still at a conference?
Maybe
no,
not.
She's back from her conference.
She is back.
Yeah, it might have been.
She must, but she probably had another commitment. Okay, let's go back. Rebecca, Will Leal was on your committee. Mm-hmm. Have you heard anything from him?
No, he wasn't responsive to my calls or attempts to outreach.
All right, so I would suggest we replace him because I don't think he's committed to the committee.
He wasn't at the last meeting.
And he was late to the first one. He has, because even though we didn't have a meeting, I do expect all the subcommittee chairs to have been in contact with their people over the 2 months to work because we are a working committee. So he was Fred's. I will talk to Fred about replacing him. What about Loretta Galletta? Was she on your committee too, Rebecca?
She's on my committee. Well, no, she's on the beautification.
Oh, on the beautification. Yeah. Matt and Fran, have you seen her at all? On the beautification?
Lorena from Galletta?
We didn't know she was on vacation.
Okay, so we haven't seen her. Have you heard anything from her because now she's missed twice?
No, but I can reach out to her. But it's not this meeting, right? This meeting doesn't count.
This meeting doesn't count.
Okay.
But she's had one absence, and if she hasn't been working on her committee, that's a concern.
Okay.
So we might
reach out to her, connect her to
Okay, reach out to her today, and then she might be the other one that we replace, and then you would pick someone.
Just see if she's still interested.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, but she has to come and be part of this committee. Okay. Okay. Any public comment? Okay. All right. We're going to go through and we're going to report on what we've come up with. And I'm going to start. Dave and I are going to start here. As we were doing this, we found out that the city of Gilroy had an expired window dressing ordinance. That when you look at the first page, anything you see in black is from this ordinance. However, it is an expired ordinance, but we liked what it said, and so we were putting some of it in, and it kind of goes into the vacancy ordinance. Anyway, if you turn to your second page, we're going to start with why we came up with what we did. Presently, there are 3 buildings that have plywood in front. Jose Montez's, which is the original Mafalda's building. As you can see here, it's been empty since 2010, and the plywood has been up for that amount of time. He has started to work on the front of his building. He does have an active permit. The Gilroy Dispatch has an inactive permit, and it has been empty since 2023, and the black plywood went up right after he moved in. Since I've talked to community development to send in a code enforcement officer to look, because I'm beginning to doubt whether that storefront is blown out or not. I know equipment is stored in the front because I've seen it, and I wonder if that's what he's hiding. The sad thing about Dan Palcrano is that he will not talk about it. We've had muralists that have volunteered to paint a mural on it, and he just says no to everything. But our committee is basically saying we don't want to see black plywood up there. And by the way, the muralists were offering their services and paint for free, and he was not willing to work with us. Jose is willing to work. Jose is very close to getting his front put in. Casey Chen, he owns that big building that has plywood south of town is actually 3 separate addresses. One's been empty, as you see, from 2016, another one 2007, and another 2014. His windows are in, but his doors are not. Dave, you got in touch with him, right?
Yes, and last week they were installing the doors,
Oh, good.
so last Thursday,
Okay.
AMC glass out there installing the doors, so now he's just leaning the plywood up against the building, so the actual, from what I can see, the whole base is secure, but now he has the plywood on there, probably just for vandalism or whatever the case is.
Right, so,
It's the front looks like it's secure from what I saw
Okay.
last week.
so we need to keep talking to him. I know I'm not getting any response from him because I think he knows that we're going to pressure him to get
Yeah,
that
and when I
plywood.
reached out to him, he didn't have much to say other than, like, 2 weeks later, I saw that they were working on it, so I think they're getting a little bit of pressure, so they feel like they gotta do something.
And basically, we talked about the goals of what we wanted our subcommittee to establish. It's not so much as a stick to punish people, but it is a message we want to send to all building owners that they cannot keep the front of their building with a blown out storefront and with plywood in front for years and years on end. We do understand that there are many times extenuating circumstances that maybe a delivery hasn't come in or there's been a backlog, and we will not be punishing any of them for those reasons. But when 15 years go by and no plywood has been installed, that does not help our downtown if we're trying to attract new businesses to come in. And that is the goal of our committee, is to make sure our downtown looks attractive so that when someone comes in, he or she wants to say, I want to invest here.
Carol,
And-
what's
yes.
written in red is expired?
No, good question. I was going to get to that.
Sorry.
What's written in red is what our committee has
As
added.
opposed?
Black is the expired ordinance that we liked, and the red is what our subcommittee wanted to add.
How did an ordinance expire?
Well, Jimmy and I talked about that yesterday, and Jimmy said that sometimes ordinances have an expiration date.
Sunset?
Yeah.
I don't know what the impetus of this was in
Yeah.
2012, so
Right.
there must have been a reason why it expired and why.
Yeah.
There was another related, because it expired in 2013, right?
Oh, okay.
Is that what?
That is according to, I guess, well, I really don't know when it expired. The date down there is 2012.
So yeah, we had a vacancy
That's
ordinance,
expired
and
also.
it was enacted in 2012, I think, and then it expired, and I talked to Sharon, and she told me it was as well. So
So-
it's interesting that they just,
Yeah, so we don't know what happened back then, but we would like to, bring some of this back. So Dave is going to go and explain what got expired, but what we still liked. So go ahead and talk about that. And if you notice our title, we changed it to Window Displays and Plywood Storefronts for Spaces Not Occupied for 90 Days. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, most of the stuff was out of this old ordinance, so we're trying to keep some of that stuff, and then we added stuff in the red. And unfortunately, I didn't put my glasses, so I can't see a whole lot here, but basically, you guys can look at it, and we have some, basically some reasons for them to, for the building owners to try to clean up the buildings. We put some dates in here, some times, and some fines also. We're trying to figure out a way to make it so we're working with these building owners, make it easy, but like Carol says, if the building's gonna be with plywood for, maybe like 9 months down or 120 days, or different time frames and so forth. We want to see if we could just find these individuals for not complying with this ordinance. And then I guess staff will just have to let us know if that's even legal or not, to be able to find people or not. So we're just kind of really just trying to figure out a way to approach this with some kind of ordinance that at least will incentivize. I mean, just kind of put a little pressure on these guys to try to clean these buildings, and hopefully with this fine, this will help us basically. Like I said, we'll have to try and figure out what legally we can do or not. But we figure that as long as we put some kind of fee in there, hopefully that will kind of be an incentive for them to get this thing going and get their buildings cleaned up. I know when I have a building that do with a weed abatement to the county, that if we don't do it, we get fined, so I'm assuming that there's something there that we could get their attention to get this stuff still cleaned up. And fortunately now, if it's true that Montez and a couple of these buildings are kind of getting cleaned up, hopefully this is not going to be a big issue. But, you know, it'd be great to get it implemented again, especially since the last one expired. Maybe just, of course, just make sure that we have the people enforcing it. You know, it's going to be a big thing.
And I think our thoughts were that when a new building owner comes in and wants to remodel his or her building, they recognize that we have this ordinance in place, and they might not want to blow out the front of their building and put up plywood until they're really ready to have the money or the permits to actually go ahead and get it completed as they're working on the rest of the buildings. We felt the 90 days is where nothing happens to them. They can have plywood up or anything else to secure the front of their building. On the 90th day, they would be contacted to say, you have 30 days to get a mural up. And we wrote down some stipulations here of what a mural would have to be: a work of art, cultural, historical, or educational value, using background panels or other methods to screen views of the unoccupied space from the street, sidewalk, and public areas. They could have faux window dressings in their glass windows, if the glass windows are still there. But we don't want to just see an empty building with papered up that stays up there for a long time. And, you know, we talked about, well, is that going to be a monetary problem for some of them? But we have enough mural artists and students in the city that would love to do it for free. I mean, we're not talking about, you know, detailed, beautiful murals that's going to come down in a month's time. We're talking about just something attractive to cover up the front of that building. Dave had Cheryl Cathers do his, you know, which was a great example, because other people can see what their plywood would look like. And that is a very nice mural that's just temporary, but it's colorful, and it gives people something nice to look at.
So it could be
Yeah.
What we're supposed to keep it to about 10 minutes?
Actually, 5 minutes, I've gone over. I know realistically, we're not going to get to all 5 groups today.
I do have a question.
Yes.
So it could be not just a mural, but it could be an art display,
Yes.
or it could be something.
Yes, yes. Appealing, right.
And this includes like paper being in the windows, because you did mention just paper right now, but I didn't see paper anywhere.
It'd be like, well, we don't want to see just butcher paper. Like,
That's what I'm wondering, because there's 2 spaces that do have just butcher paper
Yes.
in there, but I don't see that in here.
We should add that.
we could add that, yes.
There are 2.
I also want to mention or comment that I really would avoid the idea that artists are just going to do something like this for free. I think some of our artists...
I mean, we're not
But it's
suggesting
a very
that.
common thing for people to assume that they would get, you know,
Right.
the exposure or whatever. And so there should be like some way of maybe something in this or associated that helps pay for it, because you do want to pay people for their creative
Right.
work. And so maybe working with nonprofits who have programs like my nonprofit, we have
Right.
programs that will pay people to do stuff like that, but just not, well, we have artists who will do X, Y, and Z. Cheryl, I don't know if you paid her or not, but I know like Whitney and I, we did talk to Dan about doing it, because we just feel like it's such a blight, but like we don't want to always pressure the artists into having to do that just to save our downtown
Right.
type of thing.
Right. And
So just,
I don't think we were even going to, I don't think there's anything in there about payment or free services, just because I feel that's between the building owner
just
and...
when it goes to city council, maybe if you talk about it publicly, I would just not say that part.
Yeah,
Just
that's
so,
true.
Yeah.
Leave it, yeah, I see what you're saying. Leave it up to the building owner to decide how he or she is going to get this painted. And then we talked about if they ignore us on the 120th day, then, and this is where I would love to have the committee's input, on the 121st day, we start finding them, and I just throw it in arbitrary number, $500 per month, to be placed on the property tax bill until the front complies with this ordinance. What do you think?
To go on the tax bill, you gotta put it before the voters.
Oh, really?
To do a lien?
You mean the ordinance has to go before the voters, or every time you lien a property?
No, the ordinance will.
Oh, I see, okay.
You could do, I think so that's part of our vacancy ordinance, I think, and this is what I was gonna talk to you about, Marie. I think you could do an administrative fee, correct? And then we were wondering if, so let's say you put up an ordinance like the plywood one, you have an administrative fee, and then you put the ordinance to the voters to then move it from an administrative fee to a property lien. Is that something that you can do? Where you switch, like, how the fees are assessed?
I don't know.
You don't, Dan, I don't think you have to go to the ballot for a property lien. You do have to have an ordinance. And there has to be a nexus between the fine and, the property itself. So, because think about like sidewalk bending, what we're talking about, they get an admin citation if they're violating that ordinance. We just don't lien it, so again, we'd have to maneuver through the legal stuff.
Even with the earthquake stuff, we put liens on without, there was no ballot measure. But there was no ballot measure.
But if you want the tax assessor to put it on their tax bill every year,
That's what we were going.
you gotta go to the vote.
To put on their
That's-
tax
instead of a
bill every
lien,
year.
we're
Got
talking
it, that's
about.
different, because
And
a
that's
lien
through
is
a ballot.
something that could just sit there till the property
Yeah.
changes ownership,
Yeah.
or is otherwise disposed of. Got it. You wanted
Okay,
something
so
that
a
they had.
lien is, okay, so what do you think, committee? I mean, this is part of what
So
we're
I
doing
think
today, is discussing how we want to change some of the wording that we hear today. So would you suggest doing a lien? Would you suggest a citation? I think going to the voters is a little bit excessive.
I think that needs to be explored.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't,
Okay.
We have to decide that today.
So, no,
Let us
okay.
just take this and run with it
I'll
a
just
little
write
bit.
the note there, and then we will talk about because when we come back, after all 5 subcommittees have presented, then we're going to come back with the polished one that goes before council and the public. So we will work on that.
so, Jimmy, you've got enough information to do something with this? Because I thought we had to have some kind of consensus before it.
Well, but I think Jimmy, what I would do is contact you to explore the legal options so that we could put it into the final proposal, yeah.
Well, I see
because-
this as, I'm just answering a question.
Okay,
Right.
Can
fine.
you put a property tax lien? How do you do that? I can get that answer.
Okay.
Okay.
That's not work, that's just answering a question.
Oh, all right.
I'm not gonna dive into the.
No, or I was wondering, what's easier to do, an administrative citation? But we'll talk about that. We just need to explore how to word it.
Carol,
Yes.
so this is the stick, right? Did you find any carrot language? Did you find any incentives or funding that's been provided in the past for?
We
help
talked about
people.
that. The only problem was, if we were providing incentives, that kind of puts the city on the spot to always incentivize it. And Jeannie wanted to put it in, and I said no, because I didn't want to speak for future councils or future city administrations of spending their money. I think it would be great if there were some incentives, but I don't know if it's up to this committee to tell the city, you will, pay.
I think a modest amount, right? Like, so we have the facade improvement stuff out there. So I think this would contribute equally as much if we had like $250, something modest that we could help them defray the cost of a professional artist.
Right.
Because here we're saying it has to be professionally produced, right? And if we want artists to be paid,
Yeah, and even that word professional, we might, what our thinking was, we did not want someone to come in and just hire anyone, and you got something really out of character up there, where, all of a sudden.
who approves this?
Yeah, who's the art police?
That's where I was.
Do you want the
I've
art
had a
police?
question. The language is arbitrary, right?
Do you want art police?
The
Because
language is subjective, right? Tasteful and representing Gilroy, like that, then that has to go to like an arts and culture committee or something.
Okay.
So that language.
I don't know though, do we want to go to the Arts and Cultural Committee if it's a
No,
private building?
Yeah, I think it should be the private building, this is
Yeah.
my opinion, if I can't
Right.
say anything yet, but, and it's certainly when it comes to paying artists or not paying, that's up to the
Yes.
property owner too, that shouldn't involve the city, because then you're gonna get into, if it's paid, how have you notified every single artist out there that there's an opportunity for a job, that they're getting paid for? It's, you can't just
Yeah, it
choose
doesn't have
somebody
to
to
like
get paid.
RFP, right? It just,
How are
we don't
going-
want to, I think,
Yeah.
we don't want to encourage people to not pay artists, right?
Right.
That's their trade, that's their work.
But what I'm saying is every artist has to have the opportunity then to bid on that job.
No, it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be bidded on, right?
No.
It's a private matter. I'm just saying,
Yes, if.
Well, that building, see, to me, that's
City
just
should
totally
be-
up to the building
I know,
owner,
the city's not
you know?
paying for it, the city should
And-
need to be involved in it, is what I'm saying.
But then, going back to a committee or someone who gives the okay, I don't want to see it going to the Arts and Cultural Commission, because that could hold
It
it
makes
up.
it look like it's a city thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
it
what I'm
isn't.
trying to say we should be avoiding.
Well, it adds too much red tape too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We keep this really simple.
Simple.
I mean, let's face it, if you went to the dispatch building, if they simply put color on the wall, it would be way better.
It'd be way
than just
better.
this one mono black wall.
I guess
so
what,
then we don't need the like, because if we're gonna put standards, right? Tasteful represents Gilroy professionally, well then, how do we enforce those standards?
how do we enforce it? So do we want to,
Do we just remove that language?
yeah,
Or
do we
do we
want, I mean, we
rewrite
could
it?
remove it, we're trusting people to come up with something tasteful.
Do we rewrite it?
Is it possible for the city to kind of give that responsibility of it to an organization where you have these fines that pay for that? So you have these fines that are associated with it, right? And so if they decide to have the plywood up for longer than 90 days,
Right.
they either have to work with a nonprofit or they pay a certain fine for the city to figure out something. Is that a possibility? Where there's two, I don't know if
Gosh, I
that,
don't know if the city wants to get involved in that, though.
Well,
And, you know,
this whole
To take
committee
the
is,
fines
it means that
and-
we're involved.
I know,
Like,
that's the
this
answer.
is the purpose of
It's
this
too much.
committee.
Yeah, it's not.
I would say just remove it, and if they have to have it up for 90 days or more, they have to get some sort of extension, or there has to be like a process if they want, like an applicant, they have to come in and say, this is why we need it up longer than 90 days, and then that's when the city says, okay, well, this is, if you want it up longer than these are your options, and then that's up to them, you know?
yeah, because,
Holding them
This stuff,
accountable,
that would-
a lot of this kind of flows into
does.
the vacancy ordinance, which
Yes.
has inspections and stuff.
yeah.
oh, okay, well then, maybe I will write that down. With an arrow here that it goes in, we'll reword it. Anything else that you see that we should reword?
How have you compared to other city ordinances?
When I called, because I called 5, you called 4 or 5, Jeannie did 2, they kind of laughed at us. They said, what do you mean you're having a problem with plywood? They don't
Okay.
seem to have the problem with plywood in any of the cities we talked to.
So Fairfield, right, it was Fairfield that did have that, they had the decoration, let me look up. Fairfield does have something like that, and they require, yeah, it is, vibrant vacancy program, so that might be something that you can look into.
Okay.
And then the city of San Francisco, also has, they have a huge vacancy problem right now, and they are going a step further, which I'm not saying that the city of Gilroy needs to do this, but they're granting money to the building owner and to like individual artists or whatever to put displays up in the windows. And so I think that's just two different ways of doing kind of what you're talking about. But there is some example of that.
Nothing in Santa Clara County, though? I was just
No,
wondering
I
if
mean,
you
no,
know
they
that.
just,
Okay.
some cities took the attitude, you know, it goes up and they have a certain amount of time and then it comes down and they're fine.
Okay.
They were really strict about it. If we do a fine, I want to go back because I just want to get these two numbers correct. What do you think? 500 too steep?
It's like pennies compared to
A
what
month,
we're
if
doing.
they disobey, yeah. What would you like to see a change to? Our whole goal is to get the plywood down in a reasonable amount of time. And when you have someone who ignores it, then our question is, what can we do about it that's going to make it hurt a little bit where they take us seriously? If we make it too cheap, they're going to laugh it off.
We figured, you know, the same thing, they're not gonna pay it, if we put 200, they're not gonna pay it, if we get 500, not gonna pay it, either way, you know. So we figured just go with the 500 type number and see where it happens.
Is there a way the city can put up a generic storefront if they don't?
if they don't do it.
Sure.
Then they would put it on the city every time. all
Yeah.
these
And
buildings.
then we'd have to do that to all buildings throughout the city. We can't just be doing something for private property here and not private property there.
I think
But if it's in
buildings-
violation, if this is an ordinance and it's in violation, so then they have to pay the fine, we're like fining them, and we put up something that we created, right, or downtown association or somebody, or arts group created, right, that looks nice.
Now, I don't know if you saw this in here, but it says if it goes beyond the 120th day, wait a minute, where is it? No more no more permits would be granted to them until they settle this.
Oh, that's a good.
So,
That's
here it is, the second paragraph.
good.
Temporary front needs to be removed after 1 year. No additional permits will be approved until the active permit is completed and the temporary front is removed. And we could say something about, and all fines paid if applicable.
So they can't get like, I guess that's part of the problem is, with the building owner isn't associated with that certificate of occupancy in terms of you can't get that certificate of occupancy until all your fines are paid because they're granted to 2 different people, right? They're granted to the tenant, not the building owner.
Right,
So
we're
there
only
isn't that
talking
final-
building owner, whoever is doing the remodel
Yeah, so
on the
where is
building,
that?
and normally it's the building owner.
The city says like, this is great, I'm glad you're all done with it, but you can't, you have all these fines you need to pay before the building can be put to use. Is that something that the city can say, or?
Well,
To-
what I'm finding out is that to do your front is a separate permit. To do, a lot of different things in the building are all separate permits. So normally a building owner doesn't do it all at one time. So if he was to do the front of the building and there's still fines to be paid, the planning just says, sorry,
Like
you
they
gotta-
won't sign off on the.
They won't sign on, they won't even give any further permits. They just say, no, you've got to, clear this up. That might be a good stick.
And we won't sign off on the final inspection until all your fines are paid.
Exactly.
That would help.
And this is hoping, this is just in hopes of deterring other building owners from just letting something lag. We give them an actual 1 year to get their plywood down, and and it's built in here where they can go and talk to community development to say, this is why we need an extension, because my storefront's on a ship coming from China, it just, and something happened, that's reasonable.
And we felt the year was plenty of time, because we bought the building and you're gonna be designing it, you don't knock your storefront down, you don't put plywood up until, permits in hand, not a year before your permits. Give it to you.
So I don't know much about the relationships between building owners and if folks are remodeling for a business, but would there be, or do we foresee conflicts between the business owner and the building owner that would delay like a business starting or opening up because of this?
It could, I don't know, it could.
Yeah, if someone wants to lease it, and the building owner's not meeting his, not being compliant, it's gonna be tough for anyone to rent that space.
That's an interesting question, because what if you do have a building owner that's pretty much absent somewhere else, and you've got a tenant who's putting up boards? The property owner is the one that gets assessed the fine on behalf of the behavior of the tenant.
But they're ultimately responsible for their building too. I mean, that's part of the problem, is whether that's the case or the building owner just doesn't want to do anything, they're ultimately responsible for this. And as someone who is currently actively looking for a building, you have to be kind of aware, like, that you are responsible. You can't get your certificate of occupancy until that building is up to code, and we have to be, as tenants, we have to be aware of that, and that it can bite us, because I can tell you right now that at least 3 of the buildings that have been vacant for over 10 years, they want us to pay to bring their building up to code. So, I mean, it is the building owner's responsibility, and we have to be careful not to engage with a building owner who won't take care of their building or their fines.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, so, and I know we're going over, but this is what needs to be. I mean, if it takes longer, not today, but if it takes longer in our months before we present to council, so be it. But what we want to take to council are polished reports, so we don't look badly. I don't want to be a nag here, but I want to go back to our fine number. Give me some numbers, because we have down in the second paragraph that after 1 year, they are subject to fines up to $250 per month. The 500 was for the mural. What do you think about that?
I think it's reasonable.
I do too. 500.
I mean, they
Okay.
need to get,
They need to realize how serious it is.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Committee, you're okay? Are there, and then the decorative artwork, cross that one out, correct? Is that what I heard you guys say? Decorative artwork should be professionally produced and tasteful in a manner that represents Gilroy, because professional means that maybe they feel like they have to hire someone and they don't. I mean, they could have a son or
Maybe-
daughter that.
Maybe it gets reviewed, maybe instead a design gets reviewed by the city, is that
Maybe,
too
yeah,
much?
Just artwork to be reviewed by city.
What do you think of that one, Jimmy? I mean, I hate to put things on the
I
city.
am too.
Yeah. I don't-
Yeah.
Because it's so artist.
Okay, you know what?
It's such a subjective thing.
Jeannie,
We can say can be reviewed.
Yeah,
right?
Jeannie-
Because if it's like.
Okay, I know you're onto something, Rebecca, so
yeah,
you know what,
instead of
maybe
saying
if
will be,
it,
say can be.
maybe, yeah, it,
Can
we'll
be.
work on that line,
And
the
we're trying
three
to
of
keep the
us.
city from dealing with
Yeah.
this nonsense.
Yeah.
stuff.
Because
So
if
folks
something
subject
really,
to it, if it's something really awful,
Or
you know,
subject
or
to approval.
could be subject to
Just be
approval.
Who's approval?
yeah, just subject to approval.
By the
We'll
city.
worry about that
Approval by
later.
you- No,
Instead
I
of will
disagree.
be.
I don't think the approval thing should be in there.
Well, that,
But-
but it kind of leaves it open
But
for
so,
folks
suppose
to.
you get a mural though that's really distasteful to
Then
the
be
public.
more descriptive in this
Yeah,
sentence.
okay.
Of what the parameters are.
Yeah.
But there shouldn't, the word approval suggesting that somebody else must approve it is not.
Okay.
Well, if there's an angry building owner, right, who wants to put something offensive or, you know.
That's what I'm saying. So
against
put the
city.
parameters.
Well, you guys
So-
have, the city of Gilroy has codes, like
Yeah.
ordinances about,
Yeah.
public painting.
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah,
thing,
you do,
right?
don't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Does it
So-
apply to the private facades? of
Oh,
buildings?
we could say this, we'll word it a little differently, but must adhere to city's
The current
code or
parameters.
current
Yeah.
code, something like that. Who would I
I'm
talk?
not trying to be negative, I'm just trying to be realistic.
Right.
So when you start telling people what they can and cannot do with their private property, especially when you're getting that descriptive and subjective art, you're asking for a fight.
Is there a current ordinance or code for like public murals or, so for example, I live in Hollister and a gentleman did a mural on his garage door. The city has an ordinance and they didn't allow him to do that. So is there something in Gilroy along those lines that we could piggyback, that we could simply put something existing into this?
On his private property?
He did, he put it on his garage, and I don't know that, but it's just an example that came into my head. So I don't know if Gilroy has something like,
Yeah, I don't think we have anything like that, and I don't
No.
know if you can or cannot.
Right.
Hollister's a little different.
I know.
They tell you you can't park a motorhome in your own property.
Or
Well, I
now you
think-
have to have a permit.
I think what Rebecca's referring to, and I don't know if this would ever happen, but we have to cover ourselves. Suppose a building owner is really mad about having to paint a mural, and so he puts up a person giving the finger,
Right.
you know?
You could go with like a list of themes, suggested themes, you know? Or check and see how.
I
other
think you
cities
should
do it.
just say, no profanity, just.
Okay.
Guidelines.
Yeah, I
That would
think
be-
there should be guidelines in
Okay.
there that just
Okay.
That would
obviously
be
say what you
good.
can't.
We'll come up with that.
Or like a swastika, no.
Yeah, thank you.
Or they have the option, like Fran was saying, of then we put up a banner that we already have preset or pre-made, right? Like Visit Gilroy or something that encourages shopping downtown.
What Dave did was excellent. It drives people into it. It's exciting to go see what someone's building.
No, I don't like it's horrible.
It offended you?
All right, anything else you see that we should change or work on? Everyone's okay?
Well, for the direction, yes.
For direction,
Right.
yeah, although we bring back to you after all 5 subcommittees have reported out. Okay? All right, thank you. That's exactly what we wanted to get at today. Dion, vacancy.
So I don't know if I was supposed to print stuff off, and I'm sorry if I was.
No, I just did
Okay.
it for my group. You did not
Okay.
have to do that.
So, Victoria and Dion and I did the vacancy ordinance, and we researched several, vacancy ordinances in other cities. They were much larger cities than ours. However, they did have really large vacancy issues like we do. We tried to talk to Morgan Hill, Monterey, Hollister, places that are similar, you know, to Gilroy, but they just didn't have anything. So we used the ones that we had, and we thought that they would be good guidelines for what we were looking at. So basically, what we came up with was why we need a vacancy ordinance for the general public just to understand. High number of vacant buildings can cause major blight to our downtown area, cause real estate prices to drop, and further suppress the economy of downtown. Furthermore, vacant buildings that are boarded up or not maintained turn people away from enjoying downtown or investing in it. Buildings encourage vandalism, breaking, entering, misuse due to longevity of vacancies and the fact that many are owned by the same parties. A vacancy ordinance is long overdue to correct the growing problem in downtown. The definition of a vacancy building, what we came up with is one where at least 35% or more of the building is unoccupied or not open for business or not open to the public.
For what length of time?
So I'm getting there. So what we basically came up with was a fee-based structure that is a little bit aggressive, which you guys might not like. So the building would have to be registered within, I think we did 30 days. 10 days after the building becomes vacant, they'd have to register the building. And in, I believe it was Palm Springs, they had this where they register the building. And there are fees that would pay for the stuff that we're discussing, and so that will be something that we'll have to kind of.
With whom do they register?
With the city of Gilroy.
Okay.
So they register with the city of Gilroy, and once the building is registered, the city will review the condition of the building and assess if the building needs to be brought up to code, because that is, in reality, one of the biggest problems in downtown Gilroy, is that the buildings are not up to code, and therefore they cannot be occupied unless someone dumps a bunch of money into them, and that needs to be public information. There'll be a fine of $150 per week that will be assessed if the building is not registered after the 10th day of vacancy. The registration will include an annual monitoring fee, and that will basically have the city will be able to monitor the buildings to make sure that there isn't misuse. Like basically at the Lewis Hotel, Tony had there was people living in it. At the building I just looked at on Thursday, there were definitely people previously living in it, things like that. There'll be a report card on the front of the building, and I can't remember which city that was at in Sacramento that they had the report card, or was it Palm Springs?
Palm Springs.
Yeah, they had a report card on the front of the building, has the contact information of the building owner, address, phone number, the day that the building became vacant, and any code violations that the building has right now. Then vacant buildings that remain vacant for longer than 30 days will incur a vacancy tax in addition to the monitoring fee, and that'll be an assessment on the building's property tax, which means that it needs to go, we think, through a ballot measure, and it'll be a responsibility of the owner, whether or not the owner is responsible for the building, whether they are responsible for the building being open to the public. And that kind of piggybacks off of what you were talking about, Jimmy, with there's a leasee who's in there and they're the reason it's not or whatnot, it just falls on the building owner. There would be exemptions for the vacancy tax. So let's say the building is up to code and it is actively for lease or for sale. It has an exemption for up to 180 days from date of registration, or 10 days after the vacancy, whichever comes first. And if they need to come back and say, I'm still not getting any bites, then it would be reviewed or whatnot. If there's an active construction permit and the building is consistent and active with construction on the premises, this allows for another 180-day exemption. And then they can apply for another extension, but they have to actually discuss it with someone to get the extension. Or if the building owner, and these are just some exemptions, there obviously could be more, like if the building owner is active duty military and is deployed, if they've died, or if the building was inherited and they're going through kind of a transition. And then there would be, you have to define in use. So Sacramento, like their definition was any ground floor commercial space will not be considered in use unless either leased out or a bona fide tenant intending to use the space blah, blah, blah. So kind of hash all that out. And then for the for the fine enforcement initially, just to get it off the ground, it'd be an administrative fee, I believe you guys call it. And then this is where I didn't know if you could take the ordinance and the current administrative fees, put it to ballot to make the ordinance have property tax assessed on to the building owners, and then those administrative fees would turn into property tax if they weren't paying them, and then having no final sign-offs on permits until any administrative fees are being paid. That's the gist of it. You guys can tear it
I
apart.
have a question. Pretend I have a building, it's up to code, I've done everything, and I just can't get someone to come and lease it.
Right.
Am I going to be fined?
No, so we have an exemption in there. That's the first exemption that I talked about. The building is up to code and it's actively for lease or for sale. So I do want to point this out though. There has to be some sort of dead end, because I have looked at a building that is actively, I don't think it's up to code, but it doesn't need a lot, and it has a for sale for lease sign, but the people who are leasing it have plans for it, which doesn't include a leasee. So
A vision.
it doesn't include someone who's gonna lease it. It's them doing it, the building owner's doing something. So even though I am actively interested in leasing the space. So those are the loopholes. And actually there's two of them that's the same situation. So there's like loopholes that we want to try to close. That's the whole idea of this, is trying to close those loopholes and not putting the financial onus on a leasee.
And that's where the assessment comes in. It'd be citywide. City of Oakland brings in $8 million a year on theirs. I figure ours should bring in $500,000. And so it'll pay for itself. And by adding, $6,000 at the end of the year on their tax bill, it gives them some incentive to do something. Right now, they just use it for a tax write-off.
Yeah.
Storage.
And they don't care.
Right. Right. So what you were saying is there'd have to be some showing of effort to lease. That was your question. That's what you were getting at. They can't just say forever, okay, it's up to code, but they're not, it's been 2 years, there's been nothing in there.
Right.
And what have been their efforts to sell or to put a business in there? That's what you mean.
I also think there should be somewhere that, and that's what we were saying, so that we have these fees and it would probably create some sort of position in the city to take care of this type of thing, but there should be somewhere that people like me can report and say, this is, people have tried renting this space and they won't rent it to people.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I know the position, and there's like a lot that goes into that, but we were trying to create something that would pay for itself, like Deanna was saying.
Yeah, it's a bona fide good business, legal business. They should not be denying it. Going back to going on the ballot, how does that work? If we were to say our vacancy ordinance and the plywood removal one, we wanted to be on the property tax bill, let me just ask you that question. How do you get it on the ballot for the voters?
It's actually kind of simple, surprisingly. You get a vote of the council, majority of the council can place it on the ballot, or a referendum. The easiest way is to have the council vote to do that, and just like we did.
like we did with Measure D.
Just in Measure D,
Just like we did with
it's actually
Measure
quite
D.
simple.
Oh,
And how much does it cost? In a general
You can do it in the general election.
yeah.
What was it for Measure D? What did we pay for Measure D? 30,000?
Yes,
Yeah.
because the costs get spread out throughout all the cities. It's just extra paperwork, that's about it.
Not that 30,000 is nothing, but
I was gonna say,
it's.
wow, I have no idea.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's
okay.
on the cheap.
Okay, that's good to know. Just in case.
What's the time frame that would trigger that?
I'm sorry.
After, how long would a building have to be vacant before it's
So
like?
after 10 days, they need to register the building, and then the city would inspect to see, which I know that is an issue with enforcement, because your building inspectors are really, really super busy. So that's why we're thinking that this position would be filled with someone who maybe could inspect the buildings. So they inspect the buildings, put the report card on the front, And, if they're vacant longer than 30 days, which could be extended if we wanted to, they would incur the vacancy tax, which is the $6,000 a year. And that would be prorated. So like, let's say the building is up, they're leasing it, it's up to code, then you don't get assessed with the vacancy tax. Let's say it's not up to code, they don't have any active building permits, they're not trying to get it up to code, then after 30 days, they start getting assessed as $6,000 a year. If they only have it not up to code for 60 days, and then they fix it all, and then it's up for lease, then they get the prorated amount of the $6,000.
And you have to actually be working on the building, not the 20-year construction project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
30 days seems like a short amount of time to me, but I'm not a building owner, so. I don't
It's just
know.
my frustration coming out.
Yeah, I can hear it.
The nice thing
Okay, I'll
about
put a
this is there is a clear roadmap. Both Oakland and San Francisco have gone to the ballot and had these approved. So this is it. Like I said,
we could see an
And
example.
you can see how it
Sacramento
works.
too, yeah.
There's a roadmap where some of this other stuff we're not too sure how it will work.
I really like the report card.
I do too.
That's
I
great.
love that.
All them out.
Like that
I
one?
do.
You can tell our frustration with our downtown. It's just
On the
stalled.
flip side of that, the fees that we collect, if they are enough to fund a position, would that position also be charged with promoting these buildings, right? And like, you're grading them or scoring them, like what else can we do proactively to help them get leased or help them get rented out? Like, is that something we could?
So I actually don't think that buildings need help. I think that they could be leased very easily. Dave's a perfect example of that. He had people clamoring to get into Porcella's, including me. So I personally don't feel like, and now if it's out of downtown, I don't know, I can't say for sure, but I know that if buildings are actually up to code and ready to move in with bathrooms, because 3 of the buildings I saw didn't even have a bathroom, it wouldn't be a problem to lease them, and it would be really easy.
What about the PG&E factor?
So-
Is there an exemption for that?
We can, but there is power, and there's enough power for most industries except for potentially
breweries.
restaurants
Yeah.
and breweries. But all of the spaces that I saw, I could draw enough power from. And it wasn't just, and there's been a couple other people who, the same thing. Oh, well, we have ideas for this and we want to do this instead. And their ideas would draw more power and they would need more power. So there could be an exemption if they had someone who wanted to move in, but they couldn't get the power, then they could be granted the exemption for the PG&E. But if they don't even have anyone who wants to move in, then there shouldn't be an exemption for PG&E.
And show how they've even contacted PG&E, because that's been the problem with the ones that
Right.
need a PG&E, is they're not even
Yeah.
contacting PG&E and saying that PG&E is a problem.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh, it's a lot more complicated than what you just said, but that, I heard what you said.
Okay, I have to go to
I
another
mean,
meeting.
PG&E
so-
is so bad right now that if you saw the news this morning.
Yeah, but this has been
San
2 years ago.
announced that they're looking into starting their own power company because quote unquote PG&E is unreliable.
Right, that's been the past couple of years,
But Marie
we
is
had-
right that there are
There's 10,
people that have
15.
played a shell game with the PG&E excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And every time that you change your power requirement for a building, it restarts the stop
That's
clock,
right.
the start clock. And so if you're on a 6-month waiting list and
Only
you decide you
people-
want more power than you initially called
Mm-hmm.
for, then the stop clock starts all over again.
Exactly,
So,
and that game has been played.
And so if they say they've been waiting for a year, well, that's not exactly true, because part of the reason that their wait with PG&E, which has limited resources, and so that's what PG&E is trying to do right now, they're trying to triage their service, because they don't have the material and the manpower to get the job done.
But that's only if you're going up in power. So maybe the building owners need to have a little bit more
No,
foresight.
there are buildings in the downtown that have no power, and the reason they have no power is because when
Which
they went through the
ones have no-
retrofit, their power was severed.
No, I
Jeff,
mean,
which
that's
one has
the
no
reset.
power? Which
I don't know
ones?
off the top of my head right now.
Because I agree with Emily, when you really get down to it, it's not that, I don't know if we have any buildings without power, because we have 220, I thought, in all of them. The trouble is, the game starts with, we want them 440. and then we want to boost it up to, what's the next one, 880 or
Because
whatever.
I went through this power thing with PG&E, and I know it was residential, but the woman explained, because I had questions about the downtown issue as well, and she explained how it works. So if a building owner comes in and knows they need to up their power, if they just say they want more than they think they need, then that solves that problem instead of incrementally just going up and up. And that is part of the issue, is if you keep asking for more, it does get reset, and then you have to start over, because PG&E has to redo all the engineering plans.
And the building owner has to pay for that, correct?
So,
Correct, yes.
Yeah,
They have-
PG&E doesn't have to redo anything. The building owner has to redo everything to PG&E's satisfaction.
Right,
And that's the rub.
that's the
well,
problem.
so PG&E does have to do their own engineering in order to make, because they have to have their engineering from building to building. So there is an engineering part to PG&E, and they have to redo it every time the building owner asks for more. Because there's a collective
Actually,
engineering.
it's flipped. That what's happening is the business owner is coming to PG&E with their recommendation. This is what we want to do. PG&E is saying, no, go back and do it again. No, go back and do it again. PG&E isn't doing the design work. The business owner is doing the design work and taking it to PG&E, as I understand it.
Well, I know
yeah,
for
that's
Gourmet Alley, PG&E designed from Eagleberry down to the alleyway of how they wanted to put it in, and then the building owners denied it.
I think there's two
They don't
parts to
tell
it.
Jeff the whole story.
There's
They
two
do
parts to how it works, and if the building owner changes what they want, then it does reset everything.
Yes.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
the bottom line is that I would say 99% of the buildings for rent have power. They might not have enough to put a brewery in there or a restaurant with like high-powered whatevers,
Correct.
but there is still power there, and according to, I think the one that's been waiting the longest is Halls, and they're now way shorter. The time period has now been condensed because PG&E is catching up. So I just don't feel like that should be something that is a constant, exemption. It can be an exemption, but it shouldn't be something that holds this up.
I also don't think that, building owner, like, you all now are veterans in this, like, as building owners or business owners, and it's been a learning process for you trying to navigate PG&E and all these other things. So I just don't want folks to be discouraged if they just bought a building, it's their first building, and they're trying to figure out this process and these rules with PG&E. And so I don't want to feel like we're just, beating them on the head with fines as they're trying to learn this stuff, right?
Right.
It doesn't, and I agree with you, but it doesn't seem like the new building owners are the problem.
No,
Okay,
the new ones
so
are
then-
not the problem.
So-
It's our old ones.
So how
You
do
know,
we
the halls-
keep them from getting,
Yeah.
how do we keep from
And that's
punishing
where
them?
you gotta tax it.
The halls-
$6,000 a year. See, that motivator, that's a motivator.
The Halls building has been,
Yeah, not all.
empty since
Jose is a
2004.
veteran building
Montez
owner,
purchased in
you know?
2007.
Yeah.
So 2007 to right now, we're talking 16 years.
Or Sammy Wu's building.
Sammy Wu's
I mean,
building.
that building needs just for the downstairs to be to code, over $150,000. The one next door to them, they said that there's someone who's leasing, there hasn't been anything that's happening in that building, but you can't rent it. 7411, you can't rent that one either.
I'm laughing because the one next door to Sammy Wu is Walton, Montez, and Taft.
And supposedly there's someone who's leasing it, but there's still human excrements in the back.
Sammy Wu, his building's been in that situation since 2009.
Why don't we just push for the tax the vacancy, and if they gotta pay $6,000 a year for an empty building, they're gonna get it fixed real quick. I would think so.
Is 6,000 more than they're getting in,
They're getting
tax
zero.
write-offs?
That's a good catch.
No, right.
Oh, tax write-offs.
Good question.
Yeah.
But it'll bite into that tax.
It's gotta be more.
Well,
Yeah.
so tax write-offs you're still spending the money. So you can depreciate it for a while, which is great, but in the end, you're still putting money out even though it goes against your tax, and it doesn't drop your tax down as much as you're spending. So tax write-offs are great and all, but they only go so long, and if you keep having them pay more and more money, it's not gonna be worth it to them, and the depreciation is gonna get smaller and smaller and smaller on these buildings.
Yeah.
All depending on how their accountant is writing it off.
they're paying tax,
So, yeah.
property tax.
But I think it should start out as an administrative fee until we can get the ballot measure, because if we wait 2 more years, it's just gonna,
And see, for vacancies, that one really needs to be on the ballot, for the lien against property tax, because they're going to ignore it.
and the plywood could go in there.
Yes.
You could tuck it in.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, like, I almost felt like they should have been the same, and then we would have had room for another one, because there was so much in here that when we researched it, it tied in with it.
And then it would just be $130,000 expenditure. I like it. We
It has to
could, we
be on
can
the, it
combine
has to
it.
be in a general election, we can't get it passed in a
Yeah, I think so.
primary, yeah.
General election.
24.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ready by.
It's easy.
We might be ready by 24.
Yeah,
Who knows?
it's easy, we just have to
Yeah.
vote on it as a council.
Okay, yeah, and we can combine it. Well, what we would do basically, Jimmy, is, we would polish up ours, you would polish up yours, whatever, and then we bring back the final, then we submit both, well, we present both at council, then we submit both of these together to staff to combine it into one ordinance, right?
Do you see any red
That-
flags with
so-
this?
And then it goes
With
to.
vacancy tax?
No?
No, I know San Francisco's in a lawsuit over the residential vacancy tax, but not the commercial. And like I said, there's a road and there's a pathway in both cities, so I'm not afraid to cut and paste.
And Sacramento's a good one too, because they have a really good.
Yeah.
Well, we're 4 minutes away. We tackled the 2 big ones today. Next month, next month we'll hear on, code enforcement, beautification, and the noise. Those should go quick. And then we will come back with polished ones in October.
You prefer
In the-
them printed then?
Pardon me?
A good printed,
I
like yours, yeah.
You should
It's
print
good
it.
to have it
Don't
in
follow
hand.
my example.
It would, if you'd like. I'm not gonna mandate it. It's up to you.
And I can polish this up and email it to everyone if you guys want. I don't know. if
I would
that-
like to, yeah.
Feel free to poke holes in it.
Well, let me polish it up.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, you know.
Is there, can I make one other comment too, and it's called, it comes under the category of delayed intelligence. So it should have taken place during the original conversation. But there's a couple of things that still bother me about the downtown that we didn't address, and one of them is a building where the facade is completely done, it's beautiful, and it's papered, the windows are papered up. So it's not being used for a street front use, it's clearly the business owner must be using it for storage or I don't know what. But the building looks beautiful, but it's papered up.
And that's.
And that's when we
talked
put it
about
into
that.
the plywood.
Yeah.
Okay.
We added
I
that.
wasn't sure that was part of it.
Yes.
And the other one is some of these buildings are really awful, like the old liquor store between 3rd and 4th Street, that where it's got 4x4 posts. And it's
There's
horrible,
lights
it's been
on.
horrible looking for years.
There's lights on,
Yeah,
at
at
night.
night.
It's
The Good
either
Life
they're working
Deli?
or someone's living in there.
Probably some.
The Good Life Deli?
Yeah.
Oh, my husband was just asking me about that. He was like, well, what
Yeah,
about
they
that
have an
building?
active Instagram page.
Oh,
And
they
there,
do?
it's
Yeah. I don't know
I
what
hope they-
point they're.
do, because I'd love to have a deli here.
Let's see, the next meeting is September 12th. Okay, it'll be advertised on the calendar, and we will be here on the 12th. Everyone, have a good month, and we'll see you then.